Andrew?
Two questions with regards to the fuel. The first being, could you remind me what happens to the fuel budget if you get more money and you end up not using it? Does it just flow back to the general fund at the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay.
That's basically what a contributor to our free cash.
Okay. The other question I had, though, is that you mentioned that 2021 and 2022 from a process or from a current consumption are really close, year over year. But you used the methodology of just taking the 12,000-ish and multiplying it by 6. Do we know, and I don't know what the fuel use, bell curve looks like over the course of the year, do we know that if we stayed generally within trend year over year, if that $12,000 figure will necessarily meet what we did last time?
I don't know for sure, but because we use the snow budget for a portion of the year,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable saying that I don't know this factually, but I'm comfortable saying that yes, I think that will satisfy, if not potentially even have a little bit of excess by the end of the year.
Okay, I guess my concern would be that the 6 months you used are representative for lighter use, so wouldn't be representative appropriately for the heavier use season. But if you're saying it's something you've considered and we're good, then I have confidence in you.
I don't know that it's, I think intuitively we think, the winter time is a heavy use because we're plowing, but we're trying to be active in the summer too and get a lot of stuff done. So I don't necessarily think it's, I think our fuel use is pretty steady across the year.
Is it? Okay.
Not necessarily like this.
You know better than I. Thank you.
Walter?
Just for clarity, the plant contract is an outside company is running the water treatment plant, and they have a cost of
Correct.
CPI increase.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And can you go to the other slide? Right. So I just wanted to understand this a little better, but didn't you already expend the amount on the elevator? So is the request already spent?
Yes. Yes. So we pulled it out just to be clear about where that money was, but technically you can move that over to the column left of it and add it together, and you'll be.
So that would be added to the 49. We've spent almost 24. Then.
Yes.
Okay.
If you're adding the 5,000 we've already spent plus the 19,000, correct.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Can we buy in futures? I know that's, but with regard to gas, can you buy in futures? No?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Speculate on the price of gas,
Right.
I mean? Well, it's
Futures,
coming
like
down
you
now.
would do
So.
oil, or you would do, other commodities, no?
We're part of a state contract, right?
Yes, we use a state contract. Okay.
So we're already getting, we think, the best deal we can get. Yeah.
I got distracted when you were talking about where some of the cash was coming from. Did you have a conversation about taking this 111,000 from free cash as opposed to an RNA?
Yes, I was going to mention that. So did discuss with the town manager and the finance director the potential that fuel would continue as it is in the article, raise and appropriate, but the building maintenance fund could be taken out of free cash. So it would be, I think we would separate this article into two articles. Is that what you're getting at? Because that's the discussion we've had.
It's an operating expense that we're dealing with, and I understand why they want to use RNA. It's just a question I had. We're going to meet with them in the near future. I can ask their rationale for that. Okay, given the size of the ask. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand the intent to be to separate it. Really, at the end of the day, I certainly care about the impact to the town and where the impact is, but whether it comes from one pot or the other, it's not super important for us, like in terms of us as the operator, but
From an operating perspective, as long as you have the funds.
correct.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Does the water and sewer come from their?
Yes.
From the users of water and sewer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they wouldn't
Yeah.
be a general RNA anyway for that?
No.
So you're saying potentially the building maintenance part, which is a one-time thing, they would consider using free cash, or they said no to that too?
I think that's what they're,
Thinking of,
my understanding is that's what we're going to propose.
okay.
My sense is that, the warrant's evolving still.
Yeah,
Yeah, so, okay.
that's not in your, it's not the part you have to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested, but I don't really, at the end of the day, just wherever it comes from.
Okay. Rod, you had a series of questions that you had asked.
Yeah,
Has Chris covered them so far?
I think he has.
Okay.
The only question I had back on the last one was on the expended. Is that just 1 month, or is that multiple months?
That's current as of the last week or so.
That's July. Or
And August. 2 months.
Yep, 2 months.
Fourth building seems to be doing good on expended.
Harvey Building too.
Yeah, could I ask
A
the
little tight there.
three members on this side to pull their mics up so that,
We'll share.
you might have to share. No,
There's
here,
an extra over here. I don't know if it can be unplugged.
There's extras there too.
okay. We all done with Article 4? All right, moving on to Article 7, the catch basin cleaner attachment.
I'll hit this briefly because I think we've talked it a few times, but in terms of what we're trying to do, big picture, we have a couple of trucks, the two trucks pictured on the left. They're separate vehicles. We are purchasing a vehicle that's going to take the place of both of those vehicles. So the pictures on the right show a truck and then 3 different attachments, a salt spreader, a dump body attachment, and then a catch basin cleaner attachment. And so we'll go from 2 trucks to 1. And the request we made at the March town meeting was not sufficient enough to cover the cost of that entire package. So we're here now asking for funding to pay for what's pictured in the top picture on the right, which is the catch basin cleaner. So you may recall from town meeting, we talked this similar slide. At the time, we said we needed $147,000. Now we're asking for $168,000. The price actually hasn't changed, but at the time, we had the potential to use some trade-in money and to basically lower that cost. There's still the potential to have trade-in money from these trucks, but I want to make sure we have all the money available, and then if we get to lower the cost because we have some trade-in value, that's fine, but we're probably not going to see this equipment for another year and a half. And so we're going to use these trucks in the meantime, and if for some reason something happens to them and we don't trade them in for the value we think we're going to get, then that doesn't work out for us. So we think it's a hefty cost. Well, it is a hefty cost now, but we're saving by consolidating vehicles and not having to replace 2 vehicles instead of 1. There's also maintenance costs associated with maintaining, 1 versus 2. So we just think it's a smart move, and that's why we're pursuing it. And subject to your questions. Yep.
So if the special attachment wasn't purchased, does that make the cleaning of the salt basins more difficult and therefore potentially more expensive, or does it make it impossible?
So we have the truck on the left, on the bottom, that exists, and we still use that.
Yep.
But it's 40-some years old, and it's not in the best shape, and so it's going to I can pretty much guarantee it's not going to last a whole lot longer, and so we just want to get that thing replaced. Cleaning catch basins is kind of to your point. Do we do it or can we do it? Well, we're required to do it. It's a mandate in our stormwater permit, and so we need the capability to do it, and so that's why we think this is the appropriate way to.
So I guess I'm just asking, without that as special attachment, clearly getting the trucks, I totally get the strategy you're going for. If we don't vote for this attachment, if it means we can't clean basins, that's a huge deal, obviously. That makes this a necessity. If the alternative is it's more expensive, it's harder, it takes longer to do, other man hours, then obviously that's a different discussion, then this becomes a useful economic benefit.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out if we're talking about a useful economic benefit or a requirement, because without which we will not be able to do it.
It's kind of both, but it leans more towards the useful economic benefit.
Okay.
So we have another vehicle that we use for many, many other things, but we can also use that to clean basins.
Yep.
But there's a second order effect of it because it's like a vacuum cleaner. And so everything we vacuum out, we now have to pay to dispose of. Whereas this technique is different because it's just grabbing kind of debris and not grabbing mud and water and everything else that comes out of it. So it's better. We prefer this piece of equipment for the second order effects of what it provides to us. But if you decided not to fund it, we would figure out a way to do it. It just wouldn't be a smart way and it'd take us a lot longer. And I mean, you can do significantly more. We have thousands of catch basins and you can hammer them out with this truck. The other one, not so much. And so there's some efficiency associated with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, presumably there'd be additional labor costs as well if you use the
Yes.
other methodology.
So this truck is one person can do it by themselves. The other truck is a minimum of 2 people.
Minimum 2 people.
Minimum of 2, yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Got one.
Rod?
Yeah, just so I'm clear, so the first article, the previous article, was to swap the loader dump spreaders. So this one is just for the crane.
Correct.
So $168,000.
So
just for
we've ordered the truck. That's all just representations. That's not the actual stuff. But
Yeah.
the truck and the 2 pictures on the bottom are ordered based on the outcome of March town meeting.
Okay. And then, so you buy it from the same company, or can you still get bids on just the?
So these all come off of a state contract, and which already similar to the gas. That's kind of the best deal we get. And then based on that, who's on the contract, we source it from a local being the nearest dealer, so that when we have to go back for warranty and everything else, it's nearby as opposed to going maybe to Western Massachusetts or something like that. So that's what drives who we go to.
Thank you.
Yeah, just, you said how long it was going to take, and it was a while. So could you repeat that time? It's like 1.5 years from now, or 2 years for this stuff?
It's been, we just received equipment this year, like in the last couple of months, that we ordered 2 town meetings ago. So we're looking at about 18 months.
Okay, and the hope is that the existing
Will carry us to that point, yes.
lasts
Yes.
2 years, or
Yeah.
until this is in there, yeah. So that makes sense. You can't really trade that in now because then you have nothing.
Right. Yeah, we won't give up either of those trucks until that truck on top is a plow truck, so we're not giving that up until we get something to replace it.
Anything else, folks? Okay, thank you. Moving on to Article number 8, the water system improvements.
So this is a request, as you can see, for design money. So this is purely for design. And this is design basically a mitigation for one of our treatment plants. We always talk about the treatment plant. That's our big one. It's over off of Smith Valley Parkway, but we actually have a second treatment plant over at the DPW yard. That's our Oak Street plant. That feeds or pulls water from 2 different wells. One of those wells, as this timeline shows, was taken offline. Actually, both of them were taken offline, but one had PFAS levels that are above the level set by the state of Massachusetts. So PFAS, can get into that if you want to, but basically it's a contaminant that you probably have heard of, and there's a requirement to get it below a certain level. When we tested them in December of 2020, it exceeded the level. So we immediately went to a process of trying to figure out how we're going to fix that issue. So we're showing this timeline really to just demonstrate kind of how long it takes to actually fix problems, and that we haven't taken our time, but in December we figured out this was a problem. By January we had a grant submitted, then we found out we received the grant. This grant was just a study to look at the problem and figure out what are our options for a solution. Over several months, we came back ultimately with some alternatives, and then selected an alternative and got an estimate for cost to design it, and basically that brings us to this point here. Because we're dealing with a contaminant, we have to interact with the Department of Environmental Protection as well. So all throughout this, some of the gaps in this timeline are us waiting or coordinating with Mass DEP to get their feedback on some of the things we're trying to do, because we obviously don't want to spend money on something that they don't necessarily support or they don't think solves our problem. So all of that has happened. Now we're at the point where we know how much it costs to design a solution, and that's what this cost is. So there's a couple reasons why we are asking to do this now instead of waiting kind of through the typical capital process and coming back to you in March. So one, because of this contaminant, we have 2 wells shut down right now, and they've been shut down since December of 2020. And, you know, that's not a crisis for us, thankfully, but we have 2 wells we're not drawing water from, and we're not very comfortable with that. Like, we want to have that availability of water should we need it as a town. So that's one thing driving the timeline. The second thing is the funding for the construction piece. So the construction of this treatment plant or addition is in the $6 million cost range. And we're going to pursue, we've already started the process to pursue state revolving fund money, which is, it's a whole nother discussion about what that is and kind of all their intricacies, but the bottom line is it's potential money that could either be 0% loan and or some principal forgiveness. So we're pretty confident, assuming we get selected, we're pretty confident saying that if it costs $6 million, we probably won't be paying either all of that $6 million, or we won't be paying $6 million plus interest over the course of the loan. So it's a financial benefit to the town to take advantage of this opportunity to apply for this this SRF program funding, and if we get it, go forward with that. SRF funding will not pay for design, so you have to design your project, have it ready to go, and then you're competitive for your loan, which is why we want to do it now, because we've already we've started the process, which is months long for this construction funding, but we're overlapping the design with that so that we can demonstrate to the approvers of this SRF funding that we're committed to, designing this project, and makes us potentially more competitive with our, construction project if we already have or are almost complete with the design of the project. So once that funding is available, this funding, the 550, we immediately go into design, and then by next spring, we'll find out about the construction funding process and whether that's going to be a viable option, and then ideally move right into construction and solve the problem. And there's been a significant discussion at Mass DEP across the state about PFAS and the significance of it. A lot of this infrastructure money that's filtered down through these various federal programs is specifically designated for PFAS or something similar to that. So we feel like we're pretty competitive, and I can't guarantee it, but I feel like we have a good shot at getting something to defer some of that cost, and potentially even reducing, paying for probably not all of it, but some of it. And the decision on whether it's 0% or whether they pay for all of it or some of it is a decision that's based on they're waiting for all the applications to come in. Then they're going to see how much people are asking for, and then they see how much money they have, and then they decide how much they allocate. So it's not something we really control, and we'll find out early next year. So that's what that request is for.
Questions? Walter?
I got two.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between conceptual design and the design we're doing now? Is one just like the idea we'll use some machine, and this design is actually you'll use exactly this equipment and how much flow and all this other stuff? Or
maybe I just show a picture. So, that's not it. So this is kind of what we're talking about. This is a representation of what we'd be talking about in terms of the treatment process. So a conceptual design is something that would have this kind of on a CAD drawing, like an engineering drawing with all the pipes and everything showing, but that's as deep as it gets. And then the design is what gets into like size of pipe and right connection and all the testing and all the technicalities of it. So does
Looks like you already did it.
What's that?
Looks like you already did it. You saved us $500,000.
Yeah, we got a long ways to go.
Thanks.
But,
a complete,
Does that answer?
a complete list of all the parts that are needed
Yeah, there's all.
as well, right?
So we're talking kind of to an engineer who's looking at a big picture, and then he's going to go to lots of other engineers that are very specific in their field that are going to answer all kinds of questions about this. So.
And none of this is invention, right? This is people have implemented similar things
Yes.
elsewhere that
Yep.
work.
Yes.
So it's not.
And we've had this discussion.
Low risk thing.
We've had the discussion with DEP, and we discussed our option with them, and they were supportive of it. They've seen it other places in Massachusetts. So yes.
And my third question is, what about the other wells? Is there any possibility of having to do this there, or that only if PFAS show up or something? Or?
Yep, so all the wells, all of our water's been tested. This was the only one that exceeded, the only one that's actively used. We have another well that hasn't been used for over a decade that was also exceeded, but that you kind of discount that one. But all of our active wells and water sources have been tested, and they're routinely tested. Because we had this one that was high, we have to test on a more frequent basis, and they're all under the limit.
I guess maybe following on your question, though, are we concerned if we discover PFAS in one of our other wells that we'll have to replicate this process, design and build for the second wells, or the additional wells?
So obviously, we don't want that to happen, but if it did happen, depending on where it was, this process is going specific to the Oak Street treatment plant, which feeds from 2 wells, and all of our other wells are feeding somewhere different. So if there was an issue somewhere else, we would have to come up with a solution that solves that. Like, this solution does not solve any other. If there was an issue somewhere else, this solution wouldn't solve any other well, because there are different locations, different pipes, and all that sort of thing.
Andrew, go ahead.
And I guess building off of that, PFAS is one of the new conversations, but things like microplastics are also on the rise. Is this sort of a system going to be able to expand to deal with other potential issues that may happen? Contaminants, I should say.
Well, so I can speak to PFAS, because PFAS, there's a whole slew of different types of PFAS, and we test for 6 out of, I don't even know, there's lots and lots of them. So if over time, which is probably likely, they add more versions of PFAS to test for, this process would help us, would address that. If there's other contaminants that beyond PFAS that arise and we have to now, treat for them, I can't guarantee, because there's a variety of ways we treat, and I can't guarantee that this would address that, but I'm confident in saying it would for PFAS. If that, the requirements for testing of that expand and for some reason we find an issue. Does that
Yeah,
make
no,
sense?
that's perfect, thank you.
Melanie?
And I don't know if you can answer this. So the design specific is about 11% of the total cost. So historically, when we redesign something, is that at par with what we've spent historically?
The design versus the total cost?
Right.
Yeah, it's for kind of just back of the envelope, it's about 10%.
Okay.
Well, I'll let you ask, but I know you have a question about design build, and I can speak to that. But
Yeah, actually, I'm glad to, actually I had another one, even bigger picture. At what point would it make sense to put in a new well as opposed to trying to fix a well that has a contaminant issue? Because there'd be maintenance costs over time with that as well.
So the town has been actually very active over decades of searching for wells and sources of, not searching for wells, searching for more water and then installing wells. And we actually just dug a well last year that was the culmination of years of process to figure out where that water is and all that sort of thing. So I won't say we've exhausted everything, but we've already done extensive amounts of work. And I'm talking years, not recently. I've not been here super long, and this is all previous stuff done by lots of good people. So there aren't a whole lot of options that we know of out there for more wells. But the other piece of that too is everything we take out of the ground is permitted, and we're regulated for how much we can pull out. So the process for locating a well or locating water and then getting permitted to remove that water it's years long in the process. And so that wouldn't necessarily be a reason to not do it, but we don't have the option right now that's readily available to go take it from another well. And these are good producing wells, and there's 2 of them. And I mean, technically we could use these wells now because you're allowed to blend the water. And as long as that blended water is below the limit, then that satisfies the requirement. But if we were to do that, we wouldn't be maximizing what we can pull from the ground for that well. So thinking down the road, especially if we continue with things like this summer in terms of drought and our reservoir is not a significant source of water for the town, we're going to be relying on wells. And so from a longer term perspective, I think it makes sense for us to have some redundancy and a little bit of resiliency in our system. And so I would not want to give up these wells, even if we find additional wells over time. So it's a lot of money, but water is important. I mean, as you all know, and I don't think we want to. So we just want to be able to take advantage of what we already have.
Else, folks?
So
I did have a design
Yeah, so
question.
for design build, I know you've asked me that before, just in general. So in general, to pursue a design build, first off, the project has to be over $5 million, which this one meets that threshold, but generally our projects that we're doing are, for the most part, under $5 million, which is why we wouldn't necessarily or haven't necessarily pursued them. Particular to this one, it's the timeline that we showed previously. We've already invested a significant amount of time, and design build, we get a 30% design, and then we'd have to go out and find someone to handle the rest of the design and then build the project. There's just I think it would really extend the length of the project to pursue it for very little gain financially. For us to pursue a design build with this specific project, we have to go to the Office of Inspector General and get approval. We have to go to DEP and get approval. and it's basically a waiver because they don't typically support them, or it's not the norm. So we've already had some experiences, and I'm not criticizing, a state agency. I'm just saying it's a lengthy process to deal with a state agency, and so it doesn't seem to us to be for this particular project to be the smartest way to get something done quickly, and the savings aren't going to be enough that would make it really worth the effort to do that. So I'm happy to talk more details about it. But
I'd love to talk to you more about offline. I don't think this is the place, but I think town council is actually on the board of the Design Build Institute of America, so I think he'd be a good resource. We could talk to him about it.
Yeah, and like I said, I wouldn't dismiss it outright. I mean, it's something we should definitely consider. For this particular project, I don't think it fits the mold that would make sense for us to get this thing done and get our wells back online.
No, be glad to discuss further. I think the advantage is you wouldn't necessarily have to expend this amount of design money up front to get to that spot, but we can talk about it.
That's true, but the thing is with that is that we have to, we can't commit to anything unless we have money appropriated. So if we only appropriate money to do 30% design or whatever the number is, then we have to do that. Then we have to come back, ask for more money to continue. And we have to do that on a cycle. I mean, potentially you would allow us to do that out of cycle, but normally we would have to either wait till March or do it in October. And so if the timing doesn't work, then we're sitting and waiting, for another opportunity to ask for more money. And that's not unique to this project. That's just in general. It's, there's a construction season, but if we don't get our money till March, then we have to contract it. So really we're in July before we actually start doing any construction, and then we have to really be done by September, October. And so I'm kind of getting off on tangent, but there's a whole cycle that doesn't necessarily line up with our financial cycle. And that's not unique to Westborough, but that's just kind of a side note that, is a little frustrating sometimes, but not anybody in here's fault or issue, but just kind of the way it works.
Probably worse when town meeting moved to May.
Yes. I mean, you're pretty much
You're not
done.
getting your money till June.
Yeah.
You're not even.
You're waiting till the
starting
next year,
September.
essentially. Yeah.
Chris, this isn't in your capital plan for the next 5 years, right? Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
Because I'm looking at the capital plan summary, and I can't find it in here. Doesn't mean it's not here. But this, potentially, we're looking at an additional $6 million. Am I correct?
Yes. I don't know specifically what you're looking at, but the summary chart, kind of the $40 million that you've referenced before,
Right, I remember
it's
that.
built into that number.
Okay.
I think it was in as 4, Mike, if I remember right.
I'm sorry, what?
I thought it was in for 4 million.
4 million, not 6 million.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm looking at your summary, in the capital improvement plan summary for 23 to 27, and your total is 5.2 million. So it's not in here. And it could be just a document I'm working from. Andrew, do you know anything about that?
I don't know.
Okay.
We haven't connected.
So if this document is correct, then we've got an additional 4 million on top over somewhere in the next 18 months?
Yes, well, it'd be 6 million
6 million.
based on
And
what
then-
you're saying, but I can't really visualize what you're referring to. So, yeah.
All right,
But-
we can discuss it offline
Yeah.
as well. It's my only concern is that we have to pay attention to infrastructure issues, and I've said this before publicly, as well as some of the nice-to-haves that people want. And if this is going to result in another $6 million expenditure over the next, let's say, 24 months, just arguably use that timeline, that's a big chunk of change for the voters to swallow. Okay. All right.
It could be a borrow, though, so it's
So
over.
it could be a
20
borrow,
years.
still, they're going to pay it over 20 years instead of, yeah,
That's a big difference.
yeah.
Goes
As
back-
long as
Over
you're.
2 years versus 20.
As long as you can, you know, we've had the conversation, as long as you can afford it, it's not a big deal, yeah. Okay, any other questions for Chris?
We do have one other
One other
article.
item? Okay,
Article 9, well, it's not our article specifically, but I think it was highlighted. So it's a rescind of a borrow. That project that's listed there was funded through ARPA,
Yeah.
so that's why we're rescinding it. And then I do have an additional article that we're intending to add. So, and this is very recent, so it's not in your warrant. It will be in the next version. Spoke to the town manager about today. So we are required, not just Massachusetts, but the country is required by the EPA to inventory all of our water service lines. So the line that goes basically to every house or every commercial property for lead, right? Because we can't have lead pipes. And so we have to inventory. And then once we do the inventory, if you discover lead, you have to come up with your plan to address it. So we have a requirement to do that inventory. The requirement is you're required to be complete by 2024, which is still a little ways away, but it'll come fast. So there is money available through this similar program, this SRF, the State Revolving Fund, where it's completely reimbursable. So we would hire a consultant, which we've already gone through this process to figure it out and find someone, get a cost. Got a cost of $100,000. But for us to actually use the money, we have to have it appropriated first by the town. So we really don't ever spend the money because we're going to get it back, but we have to go through this drill of getting it appropriated. And we've done this before. We did it with a grant, I think a year or two ago. So we were trying to figure out a way to not have to do that, but looks like we've got to do it. And so there is a big pot of money, $20 million, that Massachusetts has to devote to this problem or this project that every town needs to do it. And so I imagine every town is going to be asking for this money. And so we want to get our request in sooner rather than later. So we're not going to wait till 2023 when the money's not there anymore and have to pay for it ourselves. So by the town just supporting this and appropriating the money in October, we can get a request in and then potentially, get that project done and have it paid for by someone else.
This is breaking news, new article.
Westborough TV.
Westborough TV is going to have the alert going on.
Andrew?
And this $100,000 covers the plan required to do this and the execution of the inventorying, but not the remediation that would have to come out of anything that's found.
So remediation is a whole nother step after that. And thankfully, we don't think we have a lot of lead, but we have to document it. We have to obviously be sure about it. But yes, that's a part two. That's a future cost to remediate whatever issues there might be that are discovered during this inventory.
But that 100,000 gets us through the plan to discovering the extent of the problem, whatever that may be.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we think that will be consolidated, the lead pipe issue? Like to the old houses or this region in here versus the outskirts where your building is newer? You have to check everything regardless,
We have
is what you're saying.
we have to validate everything in the town,
Okay.
but there's definitely, like newer construction wouldn't be allowed to use lead, so we can
Right.
kind of check that block off pretty quickly, but
Okay.
obviously the older part of town, we have to do some more investigation. So it's a lot of just homework that has to be done, and that's what this consultant helps us do.
I'm sorry, Chris, we were just,
No, so that's all I have.
anything else? Folks? Chris, thank you very, very much. Thank you. Maria Elena, behave yourself. All right, thanks.
Very quickly, Chris, we had recently we had the opportunity to drop off the hazardous waste. And I know that that was an item that was before the town to pay for the event, Hazardous Waste Day. And at the time, there was questions about how much it cost, how many people used it and stuff like that. Is that sort of information available for us to be able to digest at some point and on no timeline to share?
I believe it is. It was that waste pickup day is actually managed by the health department.
Oh, okay.
They use our facility,
Yeah.
and we support them, but they kind of track the numbers, so I just don't know.
I'll take the question to them.
I would imagine that number is available.
Melanie's our
Liaison.
liaison.
I'll get that to them.
Brilliant.
I'm
thank
all
you.
over it.
Seemed like you guys, except the people in the white coats.
And on hazardous waste,
Yeah.
which, well, it's done at the DPW's Board of Health. So, yeah. It's like the trash, right?
It's like the trash.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Good to see
Derek,
you.
thank you. Maria Elena.
Bye,
Have a
y'all.
great night, guys, okay? Jeff, is there anybody in the waiting room?
No, but Zach and Todd are in there.
Perfect.
It's absolutely
That's
perfect.
what we need.
That's who we need. The question is, they sent me slides. They sent the slides to me. Did they send them to you as well? Or can you share a screen with them?
Oh,
They're here, so we
Oh, we better go to commercial.
cut the commercial. You want to take, does anybody need a recess? A brief recess?
Breaking news, commercials,
Breaking news commercial.
parts of comedy tonight.
So they're joining us.
Remotely.
Okay.
Alternate broadcast with the brothers doing the AFC.
Like the hockey games, when we have hockey commentators?
Yeah, well, they do those on football.
so are we allowed to compete with Monday Night Football, Mike?
Monday, but not Thursday.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, I might be able to share the presentation, like screen share. I don't know what kind of setup you guys have here, but that might be an option. I don't know if Aiden's there, if that works for him.
Yeah, Jeff is working on it. Hang on if you will, Zach, okay?
Certainly, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to go up.
Snap, snap, chop, chop.
You have an engineering background, Rod?
And who,
My first job was at a wastewater treatment plant.
was it? Wow, that's cool. And who on the select board has the engineering?
Yeah,
Oh, were you
just
saying this
temporarily mute.
Yeah, it is temporary.
What was your question?
No, I
Temporary.
just want to hear more about the engineering
No, the
stuff. 'cause we
select,
had
I thought you
20,000
said
questions,
we might
clearly.
be able to,
I always thought you spelled,
Oh,
Keep it
no,
on
no,
mute,
the,
yeah.
yeah, because you're sitting at the meeting and
the
then
town
you're ready
council.
to talk.
oh,
you can
town
push it
council,
in.
who was that?
Yeah.
But they don't probably trust us. 'cause-
Seems you don't have enough mics over there too, so I wonder.
No, they got three.
It's a good specialty,
Yeah.
you know?
They each got one now.
Okay.
Meeting tomorrow, Walter.
I got like 3 meetings tomorrow, I think. Which one are you talking about?
Yeah.
Library? private club. Got them all.
Oh, your normal shift, isn't it?
What?
4 a.m.?
No, my husband was traveling, so he was up at 4. I'm like, oh, I guess I'll get up.
Fell
I know.
asleep.
Like, darn it.
Happens to me too.
Zach, if you can hear me, we're waking up the screen for you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I am too.
I'm gonna start calling you Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman it is.
Bright blue light is gone.
Come on, a second. One more thing from upstairs, no.
Little technology issue, Zach, hang in there.
While we're reading on that, it was roughly $500,000 to design the PFAS filter. And then it's gonna be another $6 million to actually build it. And the current system, you could blend the water and meet code, but that's not ideal. That was my takeaway.
Yes.
Not just, yeah, and he can't blend the full amount of the water.
Right.
Because it would be
Lose
too
water.
high, the level would be too high. Plus, do you really want any of it in your water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the blending going to your house or mine? Because I'm not
Yeah.
doing blended water.
Okay, Zach, we have you on the, we have the slides on the screen, so, excuse me. Thank you for coming this evening. Is, Todd, are you with us?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you for coming this evening. So this evening, we're going to be talking about Article 17, the Economic Development Committee revolving account. So Zach, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Advisory Finance Committee for accommodating Todd's schedule and mine tonight. So I wanted to start out by just giving a brief overview of the article that's before you today. This article would amend the maximum expenditure for the Economic Development Small Business Grant Revolving Account from $40,000 to $60,000 annually. Currently, the town receives $60,000 per year through agreements for digital billboards, all of which go into the small business grant revolving account. And these funds, again, are deposited from billboard fees directly into this account, which receives $60,000 deposited in December. And we are requesting that the town amend the maximum expenditure that we can use to fund our small grant program from this account. Doing so would have a pretty big impact on the grant program. It would allow the EDC to issue at least 4 more grants per year, and likely more than that number. Taking a step back, not all of you might be so familiar with the EDC's Business Assistance Grant Program as Rod, but I wanted to give you guys an overview of what this is, how it works. So the purpose is to provide financial assistance to businesses that are growing or expanding in Westborough, or stimulating investment in vacant or underutilized commercial space in Westborough. The way that it works is that certain applicants and uses of funds are eligible. So to be an eligible applicant, you need to be establishing either a new or relocating a business to Westborough, ideal physical location, or you need to be seeking to grow or expand an existing Westborough business by things such as facade improvement, merchandising, equipment, expanding the products that you might sell at your business, or expanding the number of customers that you can serve. Approved uses of grant funds include and are limited to things like interior renovations, merchandising components, retail, food service equipment, furniture, fixtures, sign and facade improvements, parking lot expansions, and rental assistance for new businesses only. The way that funding for this program works is that the EDC can issue grants up to $5,000 unless the project is seeking a match for the mass vacant storefront program or another like state financial incentive program, the EDC could award up to $10,000. Staff, including the community development director, myself, and the chief assessor, review these applications for completeness, and we score them on a rubric that was created by the EDC to assist in determining who will get what awards. The EDC then hears from each of the applicants at one of its regular meetings and makes determinations for funding on those applications at that meeting. Most applications are submitted for reimbursement, so that applicant or the award winner makes a purchase, and then the town reimburses them for that purchase. Although it's possible that the town could pay vendors directly if so desired. And funding for this program is dispersed quarterly. So at our February, May, August, and November meetings are when the EDC will actually close the deadline for applications, review them, and then issue awards. A little bit of the history on the EDC's grant program is that it's actually still relatively new and it's growing. And so the program was actually established in June 2019 with a maximum expenditure of $25,000. That was expanded to $40,000 in March of 2020. The program has been tweaked a little bit over the last couple of years as we've seen it take off. Specifically, it was rebranded in July of 2021 as the Business Assistance Grant Program, and that's when the EDC started reviewing applications quarterly. In October of 2020, the EDC adjusted the maximum award amount to align and reap the maximum benefits from the Massachusetts Vacant Storefront Program. And then more recently, we've adopted the rubric to assist the board in making tough decisions during the competitive application process. But most importantly, the reason why we're here today is that the EDC's Business Assistance Grant Program has unmet demand. We've seen, especially over the last year, when we've made it a priority to better market the grant program, we've seen application volumes rise, peaking in Q3 of 2022 with 10 applications in that quarter alone. Over the fiscal year 22, the EDC received $122,000 in requested funds from applicants to the program, over 25 different applications. Ultimately, the EDC saw so many good projects that it made an effort to try and fund as many projects as it could, and so we ultimately funded 23 projects. What that meant, though, is that the average award value for each of those awards went down, and generally floated around $2,000 in average award value for most of fiscal year 22. Ultimately, the EDC extended all of the funds that were available to it in fiscal year 2022, and that is part of the reason why we are seeking to increase the maximum expenditure to the account in order to issue more awards through this very strong program. This next page is here to give you a status update on the Economic Development Small Business Grant Revolving Account. Its appropriation was $79,217, and we have, after year-to-date actual spending and encumbrances, a balance of around $67,325.80. As I stated previously, the funds, which are about $60,000 from 2 different billboard operators, get deposited into the account in December. So ultimately, what I'm trying to show here is that the account is not at risk of falling into arrears at any point in the future, despite raising the maximum expenditure to $60,000 from $40,000. This is a little slide to show that some of the peer communities around Westborough have really strong and robust grant programs, from Marlborough, Worcester, Ashland. And so these are a lot of the communities that we're competing with for businesses, and that's why it's important to have a strong and robust grant program. Finally, this is just an overview for the AFC on some of the businesses that have benefited in the last year or so from the EDC grant program. New businesses are highlighted in blue text. So as you can see, there's a pretty good mix of business development for businesses that exist already in Westborough, and a lot of new businesses that have come to town and used this program to actually open up their operations and have been part of the relocation decisions to this community. So we think one of the strengths of the EDC's Business Assistance Grant Program is that it can both grow businesses in Westborough and bring in new businesses to Westborough. And I think this slide really gives a great overview of a lot of the folks, new and old faces, that have benefited from this program. I've talked a lot at you for a few minutes here, and I will pause for any questions, or Todd, if there's anything that you want to add, yeah, feel free.
I think the only thing I would add, just to the committee members, that really we have been so blessed to have Zach with us. He joined us about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and really this program has taken off because of his efforts, and we really are grateful for all that he's done through the EDC and for our business community.
Thank you, Todd.
Gentlemen, ladies, questions? Walter?
Yeah, thank you. That was complete on the expenditure increase, but I do have a question. The article actually refers to also collecting money from if we rented out like this room or something like that. Could you speak at all to that? Because apparently this article also provides that any amounts from any town rentals except for school buildings would I think go into this fund, but I'm not quite clear.
I was not on staff when the original article that created the revolving account was drafted, so unfortunately I can't speak to the specific language that's there. I believe that's Article 15 of General Bylaws that has that language that you're referring to. I'd be happy to try and get an answer to that question and provide it to the committee or provide it to the chairman offline. But I would have to check with our manager on what that language means and what the origins of it are.
That would be helpful, Zach, just to flesh out our understanding of the program.
Yeah, because these two things seem somewhat unrelated because, unless it's also in that same article, but I don't understand that part of it, so it'd be hard to, I have no problem with what they just described, but I don't understand the first paragraph of this article. And maybe we have to ask the town manager when she's here.
Yeah, I'd still like to get that number if we've got one. Rental. Andrew?
Thank you. Two questions. Question number one, why are we stopping at 60,000? Why don't we just go to 80,000 so the next time we get additional funds from the billboards, we don't have to be, dealing with the warrant again?
So part of the rationale for keeping it at 60,000 is to match the amount of funds that are deposited into the account annually. Because the funds are deposited in December and don't perfectly align with the town's fiscal year, we want to be cautious about increasing the maximum expenditure beyond 60,000 to avoid the account ever going in arrears. If, for example, and the EDC does distribute funds quarterly, there's no language in the EDC's grant program overview or application that requires the EDC to actually disperse the funds in even quarterly segments. So if you rose the maximum expenditure amount to 80,000, you would run the risk of, let's say the EDC got 10 good projects that it wanted to fund at its first quarter meeting and expended all the money, it might not be able to, or not expend all the money, but expend half the money. There might not be money in the account to actually issue awards in the next quarter until the funds are deposited. Does that make any sense?
Like it's a balance, it's a limit put on so that you guys don't go buck wild with the spending. I mean, that just seems like you shouldn't go buck wild with the spending. I mean, okay, if that's the answer, sure, I'll roll with that. The other question I had was, what is the barometer of success for each of these measures? You talk about the grant disbursements. I would imagine each of those people applying is saying, or each of the businesses applying is saying, we want the money for X. What is the follow through, or what is the line where we are able to say this is a successful program because people asked for this money, they got this, and they were able to achieve, outcome X successfully?
Well, I would say a good metric that you're describing is the number of projects completed using grant funds, right? So, or the share of projects completed using grant funds. And, what I can say is that for the last fiscal year, we issued, I believe it's 23 awards is what my slide says, and then of those 23 awards, only 3 of those projects haven't been completed yet, but I would expect that they all will be completed at some point before the grant deadline expires after, a year after they receive the award originally. So we have a pretty high success rate right now in terms of funding projects that actually follow through and happen. And that would be the metric I use to gauge the success of the program.
So it sounds like the metrics of success is we've given out the money and they've spent it. But there's nowhere in that statement, I think, that says that the money that was given out achieved a positive end that, or, met the goal of the disbursement. And I may be just overthinking what this is, but or overextending what I think our expectations of distributing money from the town are. But I guess I'm curious to hear if there is a metric beyond they spent the money that says that there was a material benefit to the town for what was given out.
I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood your question. My mistake. I thought you were referring to the success of the projects that we funded. To be honest with you, I think the program is still, as I said, in its early stages. It was started in 2019 by my predecessor. We don't have any metrics that we currently track to gauge, I think, the overall success in terms of meeting the program's goals like you have described. But I think that there are metrics that we could back calculate to look at the success periodically in the future. So for example, we could look at things like number of jobs created by some of the businesses that receive money with these funds, or we could look at the property value increases for some of the properties where these businesses have moved in. And I think those 2 metrics would be in the spirit of gauging what the purpose of this program is, which is to bring new business into the community and support and stimulate investment into our underutilized and vacant commercial space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would have to think that, given it's just 60,000, numbers of jobs created, even at $60,000, if you had one, that would surprise me. But and I don't mean that negatively. I'm just saying the amount of money to stand up an entire head count at 60,000 it just seems low. But every application says we want this money because. And being able to distill a message to the town to talk about the value of where that $60,000 is going and why it's not going to pay for clean water, or although that's technically sewer, why it's not going to pay for schools and stuff like that. I would love to see a more informed perspective about the benefit of this program, because I'm sure it's there. I love this program. I think this is valuable to attract company, but a better narrative as to the value of this, so that we could understand how this compares to the other expenditures, where else that 60,000 could go in the town if it's okay. So I don't mean to put additional work on you, but I sort of just throw it out there as a thought.
I think that's a reasonable request. Go ahead, Zach. I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, I was going to say I appreciate the thought partnership, and I think that's definitely something that we're going to be looking more into the future. What I will say in sort of response to the discussion on the table is that I do think a lot of the most valuable benefits of this program, and as you guys have alluded to, we're talking about $60,000 here. We're not talking about $1 million or $2 million. We're not talking about moving mountains. But the most important value in my mind of the program are the intangibles, specifically what it does and what it contributes to business friendliness. In the town's and I guess other businesses' perception of Westborough as a place that's open for business and wants to encourage business and is there to welcome and help young entrepreneurs and small businesses get their start. I'm not 100% certain when or how to measure those benefits, but I can say that we've already started to see them in that. The businesses that receive these grants talk to each other. They're part of chambers of commerce. They're part of, other small business networks like BNI. And when they hear that the town and somebody from the town came up to them, when they were in the process of signing their lease and said, hey, you could get possibly a $5,000 grant from this community to help you get your start and to help you grow and expand your business further once you're here, I think it really does mean a lot and drive a lot in terms of word of mouth for when small businesses or even larger businesses make decisions about where they want to relocate. And so, that value is really hard to put a pin on, and it's also one that only grows over time. Because as I had said, the program is still relatively new. It was started in 2019. My position was vacant for over a year shortly after that. And so it's the word of mouth effect, which really snowballs, is only beginning to take off. And I think that we'll see more and more of that benefit going forward. I think another intangible benefit of the program is that we work with our local real estate agents and brokers and property owners, like Mr. Alexander, the EDC's chairman, to make businesses that are considering properties in Westborough aware that this program exists. And so we use it like a carrot to bring in new business to town. And so, I think I was a little caught off guard with the question, because in my mind, I'd always thought about the program as, well, what's the success metric, when we bring new business into town, or when we help an existing business in Westborough that doesn't have the money to, make an improvement to their business that's going to grow their customer base or bring it or help them sell new products, when we make that happen. And so to me, it's always felt more like a binary impact rather than, something that can be measured on a macro scale.
I would 100% support what Zach has just described to you. As Zach mentioned, I'm a property owner, commercial real estate property owner, and also a commercial real estate broker in down here. And really, what this program does is it just shows any prospective tenant that's thinking about coming into town that Westborough is committed to these small businesses. If Zach goes back to that list of the businesses that had taken part in this program, there are at least 6 or 7 of them that I showed space to originally when they were thinking about coming to Westborough, and I put them in direct contact with Zach. And some of these folks use the funds to, towards their signage, towards, painting carpet, whatever it may be. But it really, I think, really differentiated us from some of the towns that we compete with in this marketplace here.
I give you kudos to the passion both of you showed to this, because you've added a great deal more texture to the success of this program than they spent their money. So I would love to try and find a way to translate and package that message in a way that again, speaks to the value of this program in a better way. And we're growing to this, I'm sure. I have a lot of ideas of my own. Maybe I'll ping you offline, because measuring the unmeasurable is like one of those awesome economic tasks that is kind of fun to do sometimes. But thank you. I appreciate you guys' passionate response. I think that's well-founded, and appreciate the thoughtfulness of it.
I applaud what you guys are doing. And maybe the question about metrics for success is better directed to the EDC as a committee, Todd. Because whether it's 60,000 or 60 million, one of the things we concern ourselves with is how is either taxpayer expenditures or taxpayer money being expended, and is it being expended properly, or how are we expending the funds that we receive as a town? And I would like to see the committee begin to develop metrics for success. And I think if you do that, as a former small business owner myself, that was always something that we looked for to understand the success that we could expect. So it could be part of your selling efforts, your marketing efforts, if you want to call it that. But at the very least, I'm certain there are models out there that are not too complicated that the committee can engage and begin to let the taxpayers of Westborough understand exactly how successful this program is, not just in an intangible, subjective way, but in a very quantitative and objective way. So I'll leave it with that. Any other questions from the committee? Rod?
Just one, maybe 2 comments. But first, I want to reiterate what Todd said earlier about Zach's contribution to making this program important and all the work they've done over the past year. I think it's very commendable. Secondly, I think as being a member of the EDC, the frustrating part was if the average amount given is $2,000, is that enough to make an impact? And I think, raising it to 6,000, and if it raises it to 3,000, these are small businesses and money counts. And I think when you sit on the committee and you listen to the applicants and you appreciate what that means to these people, a lot of them are small businesses starting out, you can really see the intangibles. So just kudos to the group, and hope this goes forward.
Anything else? Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We appreciate it. And we'll probably be following up with you prior to the town meeting. So thank you again.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, next order of business is to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 8th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Well done, Walter.
As always. Don't quit your day job, though, Walter, okay? Not yet. Don't retire.
I just want to make one comment again. This board does the best job of publishing their meeting minutes right after the thing. The only question I have, where are they posted online?
They're on the town website under our Advisory Finance Committee.
Okay. Good.
If you go to the, it says departments, it has committees. If you go to committees, Advisory Finance Committee, there, all the agendas and minutes are there for probably 20 years.
If we do anything, if we have done anything over the years, we do process well. Okay, any liaison reports this evening?
We didn't finish voting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to stop drinking before I come to these meetings.
Or start.
Or start, yes. We have to do a roll call vote because this is hybrid. So we'll start with Rod.
Stafford, yes?
Dolan, yes?
Moretti, yes.
Leslie, yes?
Bradley, yes.
Gene?
Yes.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 500. Melanie left,
It's 6:00, I believe.
probably.
It's 6.
Oh, yeah, I forgot
You have to
myself.
stop drinking, too.
All right.
Your vote
6-0.
counts, Walter.
Are there any liaison reports? Hearing none, moving on. Future draft agendas. We will meet on Thursday this week in the town hall. I apologize to the committee for this constant bouncing around. It is not of our making. It's the exigencies of the last few months. So Thursday's meeting will be in the town hall, and we will be hearing an article, the library construction article. I've invited Christy and or Leah to appear on the 19th or the 22nd, and I hope to hear back from them. So that would be either next Monday or next Thursday, just to go through a couple of the articles on or any other matters that happen to arise this week out of the select board meeting. Okay. And we're still on track to vote beginning on October 3rd. So,
Tomorrow night is the select board meeting.
Yes.
With more on the,
yes,
on the
tax
tax rate,
classification.
tax classification.
And there's, the library is presenting to the select board tomorrow, as is the school department. If you can attend in person, that would be great. And if not, if you could watch it in real time, that would also be very helpful, especially the presentation by the library. I imagine they'll have.
Imagine we'll see the same thing, so
yeah.
you might,
They'll have their number.
we'll probably have a longer presentation. I don't think they gave them as much time as we did.
Yeah, I know. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Bradley, second.
Roll call. Andrew?
Bradley, yes.
Walter?
Leslie, yes.
Moretti, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Shafford, yes.
Gene? Thank you, folks. See you on Thursday evening.